every day we wake up in a slightly different world, and in order to keep up with it, we all have to learn and adapt. Welcome to The Change, where we explore the experience of change through our guests, whether it's flirtations or just battle scars that they have. And today, joining us, we have Zohare. Welcome.
Hi, Naeem, thank you.
How you doing? Good.
Good.
Good?
Good.
Glad to have you here, man. I just gave a little intro about what the change is, but I want to start with something that you told me that your father used to say about change. There's a little snippet in there. Did he agree with me on my version of what change is? Or?
More than you'd think, actually. I grew up in a home where there were basically two core messages. One was pay immense attention to detail. Yeah. And the other was that the only inevitability in life is change. That's the only thing you can prepare for.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
And how
it's
did
a perpetual
you?
process. I did that by just sort of being, I guess, in a traditional way, rebellious and just doing things that everyone would say not to do.
Yeah.
I think I embraced change in a way that rather than waiting for change to happen to me, I just kind of tried to find it.
Yeah.
I guess a small anecdote from my childhood. There's a little garden in the house that I grew up in, and I think I must have been about 3 or 4 years old, or 5, I think. There were black ants. We have a lot of black ants in Islamabad, and so I put my finger, because I didn't know what they were going to do, and grabbed my finger, and in Urdu I said "Kida chimar ho gaya," which is basically like wrong Urdu for the bug sort of got me.
Yeah.
And I learned that I shouldn't put my finger because they might hurt me. So that changed me.
Some lessons are learned like that for sure. I want to explore a bit more about your background and what brought you here. But one of the things that I read that you wrote on LinkedIn is you finally found a version of you that you were looking for. I'm paraphrasing in a different way, and it's Zohare Light.
Yes.
is what you called it.
I didn't know you read that. That's
I have to do some research, I guess. But so there's probably been a lot culminating up to that version of you that you are. A lot of moving parts and a lot of, it's probably not been a straight line as it never has. So maybe you can give us some context on what that really means. What is Zohare Light compared to, was it Zohare Heavy before?
I think it was more Zohare Unclear.
Uh-huh.
I think every time I kind of introduce myself, I have to provide context, because if I just said, well, I grew up here, I went to school here, I studied this, and I did this in my job, and it would be pretty black and white and sort of boring, I suppose.
Yeah.
And I could do that, but that wouldn't be true, because I think with me it's always been, I've always provided an immense amount of, I guess, entertainment for my surroundings, whether it was my family or my friends or my wife. Mm-hmm. Usually not intentionally. I just make a lot of decisions or take a lot of decisions, and usually they don't end up being favorable, but I'm okay with the outcome because I figure I'm not dead. Yeah. So that's one thing.
That's a win. Yeah.
But I think, just sort of reflecting on everything that's happened. I'm 39 years old. I grew up in a home where my father was, a celebrated war hero. Fought 2 wars, which I'm not for personally, but that's a different time. And so he cast a really far and wide shadow. And so for me to live up to any expectations was impossible. So I just, from the beginning, I think I've always accepted that whatever I do, whatever path I take will be my own. I just have to figure out when I'm ready to do that. And then when I do, then I need to just figure out what that's going to be.
Right.
And so through my academic career, which was usually just full of a lot of terrible grades and a lot of trouble, switching a lot of schools, never really settling down. I think for me, the biggest challenge was I never, they said when I was growing up that I had ants in my pants. It was constantly like fidgety, moving, can't sit still, chew my food for too long, all those things. I think they were all kind of basically my anxiety or my sort of impatience for something better to happen. And I don't know what that was ever. Went to college, came back to Pakistan, had a great career, spent a lot of time working in different companies, did a lot of cool things, met some great people, had a job once where I was managing people who were twice my age, who had kids my age.
Right.
And that was really bizarre.
I can relate.
Yeah. We talked about that.
Yeah.
And so I think what that version of me is now is that I can look back over my shoulder and say, you know what, I'm happy with the way things turned out. I have absolutely no regrets with anything at all. Everything's been an incredible journey, and the version of me now moving forward is going to have to be very different, because I know now the things that I want. I've become so sure of myself because for the last 38 years I was looking for this version of myself because it was too foggy, it was too muddled.
Right. Would you say that one of the contributing factors to this muddiness was, so there's two types of ways to deal with change. There's the reactive way and there's a proactive way. Reactive is when things are happening that's outside your control, that were kind of guiding the ants in your pants, and some of them were conscious decisions on your part. Did you have a good mix of them throughout your life, or one or the other?
I think it was it was never really sort of one or the other. I think it was just one and the other. Like they never kind of happened in confluence. It was more, I don't think I realized that they were happening in any kind of a pattern or an order until I did. And then when I did, then I was like, oh, I can actually maybe stimulate or control this in some way. Yeah. For instance, when I was applying for university, I just like with everything, when I'm looking at a menu, I'm ordering chicken and beef, not chicken or beef. With university, it was the same thing. I applied to 5 schools in the US and I applied to 5 schools in the UK.
Right.
I had qualifications that allowed me to do that.
Yeah.
Again, because of all the indecisiveness that I've experienced in my life. And so I always had options, but I never really realized there were options until I started looking at how I can actually manipulate them to my advantage in a good way, of course, and not hurting other people. Right. And so going to college for me was not so much like bettering myself, getting a higher degree, but it was like, where do I escape to?
Yeah.
Do I go farther away from home or just far enough from home?
Yeah.
Because for me, the objective was, how can I be on my own?
Right.
So I think at that point, there was a lot of sort of push, trying to get myself out. After college, I think that's kind of what changed me, because where I realized that actually now I'm on my own, now I'm responsible for a bunch of things. I have to flip my own burgers and pay my own bills. Yeah. It made me realize, not college, of course, my father paid for that. If I had that kind of money. But I think it was when you start to realize the idea of responsibility, then you start to also appreciate the fact that you have to start making choices that are going to have positive effect on you and your surroundings, so that they influence or improve the way that you become or things become for you.
So can you give me an example of these kind of choices? Because what it's sounding like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is there's some sort of analysis that's going on in your mind. There's some pros and cons happening. Maybe there's some gut feeling involved, but tell me about a time where you had to make such a decision, such a choice that maybe affected multiple areas of your life.
So I think the most significant one that I made was the one that I probably should be speaking about on camera, because I'm sure there are others that I shouldn't. Through college, and again, a very defining moment in my life, I accumulated great debt. Okay. And with great debt comes great frustration. When I look back at the amount of money I had, I found a bill actually recently, and I was looking and I laughed at it, because I was like, that's not a lot of money, but when you're in college and you're getting $100 a month as your pocket money, and you have to basically make it spread. Yeah. That's a lot of money too. Some people didn't even get that. So junior year, which is my 3rd year, I reached a point where I'd accumulated, I think, $5,000 or $6,000 of debt. Yeah. And I was working 3 jobs. I was struggling to pay it off. I was working night security. I was working at the grill, making burgers and sandwiches. Yeah. I even worked tech support. So I got a lot of experience on security and technology and all the sorts. Sure. And cooking, of course, as well. All 3, which I love, actually, now I think about it. Wow. Yeah. But there was this moment where I realized that I've taken all the steps. I've tried to pay it off. I've sold my car. I have gone to one of those debt consolidators as well, and they've helped me consolidate and negotiate. But I'm not going to graduate with enough money in my pocket to pay this bill off. And so that dreadful moment, I can still remember how much my heart sank from my chest, literally to like below the floor beneath me, when I had to call my father and ask him for help. Right. For me, I think it was a combination of the loss of all pride. And the fear of what he was going to say at the other end of the phone. Yeah. And that I told you so, or I knew this was going to happen. And inadvertently, that's exactly what happened. Yeah. I called him and I told him, for me, making that choice was because I had no other choices left, but I feel like I had exhausted all the other options. And that was like
Right.
that one moment where I was like, I have this one option left, but it's the one that I really don't want to sort of avail ever.
It's your wild card.
It's just the wild card,
Yeah.
exactly. Because the cost that comes with it, but also the guilt and the sense of like absolute like failure to have managed.
What's the cost that comes with it? Is that in forms of relationship with your dad or a future you?
I mean, I didn't look past the phone call, so it was
Yeah.
definitely not the future me, because if
Yeah.
it was, I wouldn't have been in that situation.
Yeah.
I think it was more, I mean, initially it was the fear of how my father would feel about me, or
Mhm.
how it would validate maybe how he already felt about me.
Right.
And then when the cloud sort of shifted away, how I might have violated his trust.
Mhm.
And how for me, trust is a very important defining characteristic of any relationship.
Yeah.
And so today, having made a lot of decisions that sometimes violated people's trusts, and also of course like having to be cognizant of all of that, I look back and I think that's probably the one moment where I truly violated someone's trust, and I needed to work harder to be a better version of myself.
Yeah.
And obviously I'm continuing to make other mistakes, but I learned from all of those, and I kept going back to that one moment
Yeah.
where I made that phone call to my dad because I had to ask him to bail me out for something that I just didn't want him to help me with, because I shouldn't have been in that situation in the first place. He taught me better.
Yeah.
And so I think that was it for me. Sorry, it's a long...
No, it sounds like it stuck with you, and there's probably themes throughout your 39, are you now? that has probably popped up in your mind before you make a certain decision. But just turning that negative into positive, we want to talk about where you are right now.
Yeah.
And you're a new entrepreneur,
Yeah.
happier than ever, not just one, but two different companies.
Yeah.
As well, you have a partner in your life who's at home and at work as well. So tell me about these two companies that you have.
So again, I guess it's funny you said this to me as well, that I'll realize a lot of things as I'm talking to you, and I'm finding that how really true that is.
Told you.
Because I never really looked at my life as like two pages, of the same book at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
It was like one or the other. So the two startups basically they have a very entwined relationship as well. So when I came back from college, this is probably going to destroy my potential for valuation, but you know what? That's fine. I'd rather be honest with myself. Mm-hmm. When I came back from college to Pakistan, this is in 2004, I was out eating at a restaurant with my then, she was just my friend, and my wife, and my mom, sorry. And it was a favorite restaurant, childhood restaurant, and I ordered something, didn't like it. And then suddenly the thought that came into my mind was like, I want to go and share this experience with other people, because if I just tell the waiter, he's not going to do anything. He's going to snub me or probably just apologize, and that's going to be the end of it. I'll still have to pay the bill.
Right.
And there's no way for this knowledge to transfer and extend and create value for other people.
Right.
And so for me at that time, it was, how can I immortalize this experience in a way that other people can actually share from it or learn from it? Where, there was no directory service. We had a phone line, 17, where you would call this directory and they would give you information about restaurant addresses and phone numbers, which they didn't have anyway. So it was like even the service that was available was faulted.
Right.
So I thought, well, first you need a directory, and then you need to have a platform where people can leave reviews. So what we call Yelp today was back in the day City Search, in the US.
So there was always objective data available, but no subjective data. And even the objective data wasn't.
Well, even the data that was available was like partially available. It was like you had the name of the restaurant, but you didn't have the number of the address.
Okay.
So it was just useful. Whatever there was, it was always like just half cooked,
Yeah.
And so that was when the idea kind of came in, and then I just sort of dabbled with it. Obviously, I pursued a career. I didn't do anything seriously with it. This is, so in 2005, we came up with a name. We called it Funa. Funa is basically a word mash. I say food or khana ka burger banai, which means food, and khana, which is the Urdu word for food. As you know, we mashed them and made Funa, which is just, it fit the criteria of a good brand. Google, Apple, whatever, 5 letters, easy to say, lots of O's, lots of vowels,
There you go.
And so that's what it was. And so it just kind of continued. And 2008, I licensed a company while I was working in Karachi with the Acumen non-profit investment company. I was setting up an agri-tech company for them, and I couldn't stop sleeping at night because I was like, I need to make Funa real.
Right.
So I incorporated the company. I thought that might give me a kick in the butt and say, let's do something. But then it was always like these sort of intense motions forward, and then it would just fizzle out because I would get distracted with life. It was around the same time I was engaged and I was about to get married.
Yeah.
We got engaged in 2005. That's when the brain fart name came, because my wife came up with the name.
Nice.
Because she was just like, stop asking me this annoying question. To 2008 when we had just gotten married. And in 2014, I left Pakistan in 2012. I moved to Qatar. I was in Qatar for about a year.
Yeah.
And when I was leaving for Qatar, I hired this guy who was working with me. I told him, look, I've got this website I'm making. It's for restaurant directories and all. So this is like many years later. I'm still trying to figure this out.
Yeah.
It's just always like career first. And that time taking that plunge was just too fearful. It was just an impossibility.
Right.
My father wouldn't take it seriously. My mother didn't know how to support me. I didn't have the wherewithals or the money or anything. But I just couldn't let it go. And so I moved to Dubai in 2013, and 2014 I went to the Web Summit in Dublin, Ireland. And that was kind of the moment for me. That was, I guess, the second most defining moment for me, where Zohare Light would realize it needs to happen.
It's poking its head out.
It's kind of, it's just like prairie dogging, what's happening. And so I went to the Web Summit with two questions in my mind. Is this something that I should pursue? Is there a global application? Is there an opportunity for me to do something with this? And if there is, then where am I going to get the money to do it?
Yeah.
And so I answered question one, because when you go to a place like the Web Summit, it's overwhelming. It blows your mind. The sensory overload is so intense.
Yeah.
I was an exhibiting startup. I was actually in the, so they had alpha track and beta track. So alpha was like companies that have generated revenue, and beta is like early stage. So we were in the beta track. And alpha, just behind me, was Mudassir Sheikha with Kareem as well. I remember seeing him there as well. I'd met him earlier in Dubai previously. So it was an interesting, now I look back, it's like where is he, and where I'm still kind of struggling.
Yeah.
And so it was confirmed that I had to do this, because everyone I talked to was so encouraging, so positive. They were like, "Oh, this sounds like a great idea." And the idea,
contagious, just being there. Right?
It is, exactly. Yeah. It's infectious.
Yeah.
But then the other problem was that, look, I'm a salaried guy. I'm living in an expensive city, and I don't have any savings. I've burnt them all just trying to get to this point. Last penny was basically spent on the ticket. I actually took my developer with me to Dublin. His first trip out of the country, out of Pakistan as well.
Wow.
It was exciting for both of us. Yeah. Don't even have, that's a whole other vlog. Literally, it's like a James Bond movie. I kid you not.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I was sitting with him. We were in this big amphitheater, and there was David Carr, was very famous. He passed away a few years later. He's a very famous journalist. I think he was with the Washington Post.
Okay.
And he was running a panel, and there was a bunch of really famous people. Dana Bernetti, producer of House of Cards, Bono, and people like, larger than life people sitting on the stage a few meters away from us. And I'm not paying attention to that. All I heard is like, they're talking about how to build a brand, and I'm just like, where am I going to get the money? I need to do this. Like, I need it more than anything. And I'm just at that point, I'm realizing I'm losing interest in my full-time job, and I just need to do my own thing.
Yeah.
And I just kind of turned to my left and I said, Jawad, if we started an agency, what would we call it? And he just looked right back at me, didn't take a breath, and he just said Digital Street. That was it. So I was a domain hoarder, and digital.st was one of the domains that I had. And so I was like, because I only think was like, what's the quickest way for me to make cash without doing anything differently?
Right.
I've got, bootstrap, right? I've got people who are working with one project. I've got some skills. I've got friends in the network that I've worked with before. So how do I put all of that together and do something commercial? So I got back to Dubai, got on the horn, called a few friends and said, look, I need some freelance designers,
Yeah.
Went to Islamabad, had a little launch event, and Digital Street was born in January 2015.
Great.
And here we are, like almost 5 years later.
Yeah.
It pays the bill for like 15 households, including mine a little bit. Sophia actually draws a salary.
Yeah.
My wife and my co-founder. And so now I've got that, and that helped these past 4 years fuel Funa to kind of sustain or stay alive with very little. We've kind of scaled back a lot on the expenditure while we figured out exactly what our market fit was and what the potential was.
Yeah.
And then about 2 years ago, I decided that I was going to leave my job. I just didn't know how I would do it. So for me, I think that's kind of the moment where I realized that I need to plan things and I need to be more organized, because now the idea of responsibility has changed.
Right.
So around 2016, 17, I think I just started planning my exit.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew I had about an 18-month runway left because my contract was expiring and I could have rotated into another role within the organization. I was with the British Council at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing opportunity, got to travel and everything, but my mind just couldn't get off these things.
Right.
And so Digital Street sort of started growing and it became this sort of self-starting. It was profitable from literally the moment it started. We put a little bit of cash in and it's been break even constantly. And it's just, it was always like, everyone's like, Digital Street is where you should focus your effort because that's making money. And I was like, no, funa. So I was like, always just focus on the thing that everyone is telling me not to. And again, the story of my life, someone would say, don't do this. And I'm going to do exactly that. Yeah. And very stubborn. Right. And so now I have these two startups. I left my job full time, joined these two businesses last year, about August. Yeah. And I prepared a lot. We knew we wanted to live in Dubai. Dubai is an amazing place. It's been home for the last 7+ years, 8 years now. Yeah. And like many expats, we find so much here that we can't find in other places. For me, I think I found myself. Right. Dubai gives a lot of people a lot of great things, but I think for me, it's less about the material and more about the tangibility of self-discovery and self-awareness, because that's something I think I've hunted for my whole life.
But why is that different than what you get back home, like in Islamabad?
I think so one thing that I think I've always known about myself is that the less secure I feel, the better I do. Mm-hmm. And so the farther I am from a safety net, which is home, family, friends I've grown up with, places I recognize, right. The closer I am to that, the less I'll actually grow, because I'll just be I'll be a manifestation of the environment that I'm in rather than the version I want, I think I should be, which I don't know what it is. It's just not that.
Comfort settling in, maybe.
Exactly.
Your back's not against the wall.
It's not against the wall,
but I'd be homeless tomorrow. Like if you're ever in Islamabad and things don't work out,
never.
Someone will take care of you.
Exactly.
Thing, right?
And if it's not a family member, it'll be a friend. If it's not a friend, it'll be cheap housing, whatever it is, right? Like there's always something. Mm-hmm. I think my like Zohare light, so with all this context, is really just the less fatty version, the version that I was kind of wading through to try and figure out what's the meaning of my life, not life, but my life. Like, what am I supposed to do? I always felt like I had a greater purpose. Yeah. And I think I always thought it was going to have a greater purpose or an application to others around me. Yeah. What I never really reflected on was how it's going to affect my own life, my choices. And so I think that moment where I took the plunge, great resistance, Sophia was stressed out. She was like, we're not going to have regular income anymore. What are we going to do? Who's going to pay the bills? I was like, relax, don't worry. We'll figure it out, right? Yeah. Like 14 months later, we're still figuring it out, and she's not as stressed as much because I think I also realized we feed off each other, and those we trust and we really kind of yearn to gain confidence through. Yeah. I think that's what I was like for her. Like, for me, she's not like a rock or a pillar. She's my core. Right. Like for me, I center everything around her. Mm-hmm. No matter how much gravitational pull there is, the link is just incredible. Yeah. And it's not her doing anything, it's the way that I am, because I cling on to things that I feel safe with. Yeah. And so in a sense, I kind of brought a piece of Islamabad with me. Yeah. But she was taking that from me as well, where she was expecting that a paycheck would be coming, we'd have job security, we wouldn't have to worry about the humdrum of life. Yeah. So we could just enjoy life and do the things that we wanted to. But I was not happy. I was frustrated. I was accumulating a greater level of frustration, and I was like, before I become poisonous to other people around me, I need to do something drastic.
I was going to ask, was it manifesting in any way, this kind of internal negativity? Was it showing in certain places in your life?
Not externally so much. I mean, I think I've always been a very good kind of a shock absorber. Like, I feel like I'm a bit of a sponge. I have a great threshold for pain and patience. I can go to a great degree without, sort of making my thing known. But to people I'm comfortable with, it, they will know immediately. Yeah. But I think it was starting to build up so much that it felt like it was changing me in a way that I didn't like. And I could feel that change was not uncomfortable, but it was like toxic. Right. I was becoming toxic to myself. And that toxicity was something that I needed to kind of vacate from my mind before it became so consuming that
Yeah.
that was the only version of myself I would know.
Right.
I'm still working through it. I'll be honest. It's not an easy journey. There's a lot of obstacles, obviously, but I like the direction it's going in because I'm making choices about myself, for myself, by myself.
Yeah. And
Sophia supports everything. She
awesome.
Guides me, of course. She's navigating with me.
Yeah.
But I think it's like, that moment when you're eating really, really spicy food and then you have that icy cold 7-Up? That's what it feels like if I was to give it a visual feeling.
Hits the spot.
Yeah, it just hits the spot,
Yeah.
Eyes are teary, everything is like, I'm dying now.
Yeah.
But that sip just makes everything okay.
It burns, but it's a good burn.
It's a good burn, yeah.
I know
Sweet
exactly
pain,
what
as
you
my
mean.
friends say.
I know exactly what you mean. But, something you hear from the gurus like Tony Robbins and the guys, like when you have to replace, let's say, the toxicity in your life, you can't just get rid of it.
Yeah.
It's not a void that will be left by itself.
Yeah.
That hole has to be filled with something else.
Yeah.
And these something else are the meaning that you found. So how have you replaced those things that weren't optimal in your life, and like some examples of things that you do now or think about now that you didn't before, and what kind of output that's having on your life?
So I don't really know even how to answer that, to be honest. I mean, I could approach it like, so one thing that I really wanted to do, and I keep threatening Sophia with this, is one day I'm gonna pack a really light backpack and I'm just gonna disappear and go and live in like a forest or a mountain and just try and figure myself out. You know, like I think through time people have kind of had a different version of that. Just kind of, I need to go and shed my skin, shed my all the weight that I've accumulated. Not forgetting anything, but just cutting through it and just putting life on pause.
Yeah.
Because things just happen at such an intense pace that you lose track of how fast you're running.
Mm-hmm.
That you realize if you don't get off, you're going to burn yourself out, and you're not even going to know that you're burning out until it's too late, and then it's literally just going to be too late. I think I've substituted it with some padding. I think having home or a roof over my head has been an important aspect.
Yeah.
I mean, Sophia and I have always felt like you need two things in life. One of them is a home over your head, a sense of permanency.
Yeah.
I guess the second one, we have our own version of it, but we need to have a sense of belonging.
Yeah.
And that sense of belonging is not necessarily where you grew up, but where you want to be. You know? So I think they're kind of tied vertically with a home. And so having a home was a good first stop. Then, having a sense of purpose with the work that I'm doing.
Yeah.
I realized that when you're working a job, when you're working as an employee somewhere, one of the things that happens is that, and it's a natural part of the process, because you want to feel like you are growing, and that sense of growth comes with reward, financial, career. I'm becoming a senior vice XYZ or whatever, and I've got 10 zeros in my bank account. Things are looking great. But it's understanding that a 30-day notice on a job contract is actually a much greater threat to your life and your career than having no money but having your own company. Yeah. Because then you define your own exit time, right? Mm-hmm. But with a 30-day contract, you could be at the height of your career and it could all just be swept away completely. Right. And you will without control, without any, and time and again we've seen it happen. With people who are close to us, friends and family, and of course through the news. And housing market crashed, 10,000 people lost their jobs. What do you think they're doing, right? Mm-hmm. They have nothing to fall back on. Yeah. And so I think for me it was, how do I create job security for myself without relying on somebody else? Yeah.
So I find it pretty ironic that you're mentioning that entrepreneurship is actually the safer route out compared to the alternative, whereas we've been told the other way around, where you don't have a safety net when you're an entrepreneur and things can go to zero very quickly. But you've had a different experience?
I mean, I think I've kind of always been like I suppose a shadow entrepreneur, kind of living my own shadow. I think having a career, but then also kind of secretly wanting to be an entrepreneur and not knowing what that was. That word didn't really exist so much back then. I think it's been sort of beaten and presented so much in mass media in the last decade or so. It started taking shape, but in different forms. And I think it's interesting actually because you know, you say it absolutely correctly that it's both ironic but also kind of something that's been fed to us.
Yeah.
I don't know who's in control of feeding that, but I suppose somebody has to gain.
Yeah.
Because as we were talking earlier,
they said.
Yeah, they said. You know, who are the proverbial?
Yeah.
It's just, you know, we kind of assign blame or responsibility to some power
Correct.
that we don't know. But
Correct.
you know, like everything, there's a commodity and it's being traded. It could even be mined and controlled.
Sure.
So I wanted to give a shout out to the Online Trading Academy in Dubai, because they won't even realize this, but about a little so around the time I was actually just preparing to take that plunge, we're just about to, or we had just signed the title deed for the property.
Yeah.
And yes, actually we were just moving, or we had just moved, because I remember I was driving on this new road and I heard the ad. It was just around Media City on this road outside of the Palm.
Yeah.
And their ad came on and they're like, you know, come in for this weekend, like, you know, 3-day thing, and we're discounting blah. It made it seem so appealing, and I was just like, you know, I'm looking for like alternative sources of revenue. I have to weigh all my options, you know, we mentioned earlier, like I need to spread like a wide net and just kind of see what I catch, right?
Yeah.
And so this happened, and I came back home and I called them, and they sent me material, and I told Sophia, I was like, you know, this is happening, and to my surprise, which I was really not expecting, I just told her, because I usually tell her everything, and she's just like filters out 90% of it. But this is the one thing she's like, yeah, okay, I'll go with you. And for basically 2 days, almost like a full day over the weekend, which is very sacred for us.
Yeah.
We just basically be locked in a room at the Online Trading Academy for a 2-day kind of a pre-workshop where they would acquaint us with how their academic program works.
Yeah.
And they do a little bit of tasters and stuff, and you do some, you know, tests, and it just really very deeply engaged, and you know, you get engrossed in this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so we did that. It was cheap. We paid like, I don't know, $100 for the two of us, and I was like, yeah, it's a small investment. Maybe if nothing else, we'll come out learning something.
Yeah.
Though they did try their best to try and discount their actual long-term program, which didn't make sense to us commercially.
Yeah.
What I got out of those 2 days was absolutely incredible. It not only confirmed something that I've always thought but never really understood, but it also helped me see much more clearly about what needed to happen next.
Which was what?
See, the idea of herd mentality
Yeah.
is that, you know, you have like a sheep herder, and he
Mhm.
tells the sheep, or, you know, she in some cases, I suppose, go this way, and so they'll go this way, and you have a dog that kind of makes sure that they go that way. And so you have herd mentality, right?
Yeah.
And so with every animal, like breed, they all kind of follow in one congregation. Birds, you know, migrate in bunches. And then you have the salmon, right, that are swimming upstream, and they're tougher, they have much more muscle, and they're doing things that are opposite. And by the way, they only do that during the
Winter months?
No, they only do it when they're actually when they're breeding. They don't do it otherwise. So people think they do it all the time. Salmon actually they're mostly fish, but just for that time. They swim upstream.
Yeah.
And so what it taught me was that the whole idea of trading, and I think you'll actually resonate with this because you've been behind the scenes with trading, is that when the time to make the trade is before you find out about it.
Yeah.
Meaning that by the time you found out about it, it's already too late because too many trades have happened.
Correct.
It's just, at that point, what you're doing is you're catalyzing the direction it's already going in.
Correct.
If it's up or down.
Yeah.
And what you need is, you need to be plugged right into the system, right at the deepest part of it, where the transaction, as it happens in real time, you're finding out about it. That's the only way that you can really master, like, you know, financial trade. And I realized that if you take it out of the financial system, that's basically life.
Yeah.
Right? If you're not at the fulcrum where the moment of transition is about to happen, or is the moment it happens, you're there to witness it and take action.
Yeah.
And you have the wherewithals to do the action. It's just not going to matter, because whatever you do is just, the opportunity cost is going to continue to grow in opposite to your liking, and you're going to end up spending more than you should. By the time, you know, you've invested in it, it's just too expensive, or it's not going to give you the return that you thought it would. But that's herd mentality, is that people follow that migration pattern and then they do it.
Yeah.
And so for me, I think that that's kind of what having a career has been.
Yeah.
In life, we've always been told, you know, find a steady job, find a great wife, settle down, have a house, have kids. It's the typical suburban story of every east or west.
Yeah.
And that just never really cut it for me, because I just get bored really easily.
Yeah.
And for me, boredom is like a killer. And for me, it's also, I think I realized later on that boredom is not so much the absence of fun, but
Yeah.
it's the absence of a sense of purpose.
Yeah,
You know.
for sure.
And so I think that's kind of what it was. And so I think the irony is that the predictive nature of doing something that people are telling you to do is because that's what they want you to do, and because that's what that's indoctrinated, right?
Correct. Yeah.
But the moment you get off that sort of hamster wheel or whatever it is, and people have done it, proverbial, statements about this all the time.
Yeah.
I think what you realize is that when you stop and kind of, do all those things like take in the roses and all of that, you realize that, you just kind of have to shut it down for a second.
Yeah.
And just take perspective again. And so this is the thing that I really wanted to mention to you.
Yeah.
There's this one thing that I think for me has always been a very influential aspect of putting things in perspective.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're familiar with Dead Poets Society.
Oh, Captain, my Captain.
So, for me, I think Robin Williams,
Yeah.
his stand-up comedy was beyond par excellence,
Yeah.
right? I mean, he was a living legend, and God rest his soul. But
Yeah.
that movie, I think, was just, it was so important to happen. It wasn't just a good story,
Yeah.
but I think and I think people who've seen that movie or have that relationship with it, they immediately just understand, like whether it's going into the cave or whether it's, trying to get these like rebellious kids to conform.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's not so much like trying to get them to herd around you, but it's you herding
Yeah.
around them in a way that appeals to them.
Yeah.
And I think the moment when he jumps on the table and he said when things aren't making sense, I can't remember exactly what he said, but to that effect, where if it's not making sense, change your perspective. Just change the way you look at something just slightly.
Yeah.
That one slight change can make every difference.
Yeah.
And so, it's just been like that's it.
Can I ask you, because this is hitting very close to home for me.
Oh.
A lot of these things are, and which is why I'm quietly absorbing it, because we're gonna have lots of chats after this about these things, because I don't want to make it about me or it'll be the me show. But is that kind of mindset of flirting with the rebelliousness and not even calling it rebelliousness, it's just flirting with an alternative viewpoint. Is that something that you discovered at home, through friends, on your own? I know you mentioned you don't read too much, but it came from somewhere. I'm trying to find where it came from and what kind of cemented that within you as well.
My parents divorced in '97. I was 17 at that time. So my father resigned, and I say that very proudly because that's what he celebrates, from the Air Force in 1979 to a dictator, Ziaul Haq.
Yeah.
And he resigned to him, basically giving him the finger and saying, you know what, you take your XYZ and
Yeah.
do what you need with it. That,
Mhm.
And he met my mom, and they kind of hijacked his brother's wedding, so they had like a joint wedding because they met while the other wedding was already planned. So it's like, hey, well, we've got all the props.
Tag along, yeah.
Let's just,
Yeah.
just
You got a
hop
suit,
on.
I got a suit.
Exactly,
Let's do
right?
it. Yeah.
And so it became, they made that wedding more about them. I know, this is an interesting thing.
Yeah.
And I know that a lot of people often say that, they got this one attribute from their one parent.
Yeah.
But I feel like I am the result of the rebelliousness that both my parents individually had
Mm-hmm.
as individuals. My father was a fighter pilot. My mom was an air hostess.
Yeah.
She used to fly with the Royal Jordanian Airlines.
Mm-hmm.
Very glamorous life. And my father was star-studded, like everyone loved him, everyone knew him.
Yeah.
He authored a great book as well.
Oh.
He's extremely opinionated, and these days it's tough to, he has such a strong opinion about stuff that it's,
Yeah.
let's just say that his friends
Stressful.
are a little careful,
Yeah.
what discussions they have around him.
Right.
But I love that about him. I think that, he says what he feels, and he wears his heart on his sleeve.
Mm-hmm.
My mom keeps her heart a little bit tucked away in her sleeve, but
Yeah.
with me, she's always got it on her sleeve. In fact, a lot more. Right? My parents are an incredible force of the way that they catalyzed my birth. I think was just significant. I have a younger sister who also different from me, but still very similar in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think for me that I get that genetically. I know that because of
Yeah.
the way they are as individuals. They're resilient, they don't give up, and they're very stubborn, extremely stubborn, both of them.
Yeah.
But I think the thing that cemented it for me I'd have to say it was probably not actually. Well, there was a moment, I'd rather not talk about it on camera. I'll talk to you about it offline. But there was a period. There was a period for me where I started to realize that, hey, things are actually working out.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I should just keep doing what I'm doing. Most of my career, with a few small gaps, I've never really had to work too hard to get a job.
Yeah.
Jobs have just kind of happened. My first job, somebody referred me, went in for an interview, got the job.
Yeah.
Next job, I kind of, and it just kind of happened like that. One thing just kind of led to the next thing.
Yeah, yeah.
And I kind of meandered through my career.
Yeah.
And I think the moment that probably really sort of made sense to me was after I'd moved back to Islamabad from Karachi after spending 2 years with Acumen. I'd spent 6 months in a stint with a fintech startup.
Yeah.
Company went belly up, and then there was this period of 2 months for the first time in my entire career where I was jobless.
Yeah.
Not of my will. I was jobless because the company I'd left, they owed me a ton of cash, still do, by the way, if you're listening. But money. They owed me like a ton of money, and I was living entirely like of my own. Like I could have again, Dad help me up, but it just, for me, that was the opposite of what I wanted.
Yeah.
And there was this moment where the keg was dry. There was no money in the bank at all. Like we were literally like, we had nothing to stretch. We were in such a frustrating situation. I didn't ask any of my parents for help. Mm-hmm. My in-laws knew. My in-laws they're the most phenomenal people in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Like we need more of them, and the world will be a better place.
Mm-hmm.
They used to come, and they used to kill me. They used to come to our house with groceries. And I'm not a very patriarchal. I don't believe that a man has a role and a woman has a role.
Yeah.
With Sophie and I, it's always been 50-50.
It
doesn't matter what the 50 is, right?
Yeah.
I could do the cooking, she could do the cleaning.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah.
But it was always like, whatever it is going to be split down the middle, and we just figure the rest out.
Yeah.
But there was that one part of me which I just couldn't let go of, which was that there was a bit of patriarchy inside me, that I am a man and I'm supposed to provide for my wife. And that made me realize that A, I need to get rid of that, but B, while it's there, I need to figure it out.
Right.
And it was that seeing my mother-in-law bring a bag of onions and tomatoes and potatoes and chicken into the house was beyond mortifying. It was like my life was effectively just meaningless. At that point, I had failed in my single purpose, which was to provide comfort and safety for my family.
Right.
And then there was a moment I was out of the house and my wife was home, and my dad came by and he left some cash.
Mm-hmm.
I found out when I got home, and I was so upset about it. I said, no, we're not going to use it. We're going to return it.
Yeah.
We needed it. We had no choice, right? And it's not like we had, the rent was paid and everything, but 2 months there was no income and we had no savings. So we're just like, and because I was owed for money for my previous job as well, right?
Yeah.
I'd put it in my own pocket. And I hated everything about my life. I was willing to take anything. I was going to take a pump, fuel in your car job. Nothing was beyond me at that point.
Yeah.
There was a gentleman, Salman Wase, incredible human being. I'd worked with him previously with the startup that I was with, and so, I contacted him, and he helped me get an interview at the company he was at, Telco China Mobile, and then he introduced me to somebody. I said, there's a new company that's coming up, and just give me a couple of weeks, and I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
So it happened. He got me into some, an interview. It was a sales job, and one thing led to another. A few interviews later, and I got the job, but it wasn't the job that I was originally interviewing for. I met the CEO, and the CEO sat down with me. Very interesting human being. He's basically sitting where you are, and I'm sitting here, stressed out. I was wearing a brown linen suit, nice like beige and white tie that I got on the stage, sweating beyond belief. I had my resume in a folder and everything, and he's just sitting there calm as a cucumber. And he comes in, he had this air about him. It was incredible. It was hard to define. It's just like, wow, who are you, And he sits down and he looks at my resume, and then he asks me, so who are you? I understood what he was asking.
Yeah.
He was basically like, tell me about yourself. And so I kind of walked him through my career at that point.
Yeah.
And he summed it up in like 5 words. He was like, so you've basically just worked for a bunch of failures and broken companies. So what am I going to do with you? And I was just like, wow, this guy summed up my life in the worst possible way. He's basically given me a reflection of what I've always been most afraid of. Because he made me look at my everything. It just because at that point my morale was like so negative, so low, that I was like, I think I would have burst out crying.
Yeah.
You know, if he just pushed me a little bit more.
Yeah.
I held on. And so then he got off his chair and he said, "Please finish your tea, enjoy it, and thank you very much for coming in." And he just walked out. And I was like,
Speechless.
I don't even know what just happened. You know, did I get the job? Did I not get the job?
Did you finish the tea?
I finished the tea because I was like, that's all I got now. I gotta take what I got.
Yeah.
And I finished my tea and I literally just like kind of made the like this to get up, and a young girl walks in the room. She's got a folder in her hand and she's like, "Hi, my name is Sanam."
Yeah.
Sanam, just a footnote, she passed away a few years ago. Amazing girl. Her sister's a very, very good friend of mine actually as well. So I guess I'm thinking about her for some reason. She came in and she sat in front of me and she's like, "Congratulations, we're going to be hiring you. Here's your job contract." Hardly 30 seconds had passed. I was just like, I was befuddled.
You have to explain.
I mean, you know, it was just the most incredible like confusion I've ever had in my life. And he basically, what happened was they had a job contract. He was looking to hire somebody for a different role.
Yeah.
That role was not the role that I'd been interviewing for. I'd been interviewing with the gentleman for a sales job as a sales guy to go and sell internet connections to people's homes. And the CEO met me, and I don't know, I guess I impressed him in some way or the other, and he's like, "I want him as my personal assistant." So I go from like, you know, spending $300,000 to get $500,000 of funding to fund an agri-tech startup in the desert of Thar in Pakistan, to working with a fintech company or signing the first commercial agreement to roll out mobile payment services to the entire country. Both failed startups, but we didn't know that until later. To, "Hey, I'd like you to keep my schedule for me." And I took it. I was like, it's half of what I was earning, but I'll take it. I have no choice. I took the job and that was it. Coordinator, etc. And the guy who was interviewing me earlier was really upset because he's like, "I wanted this guy for me on my team because I saw him with great growth potential." And the CEO just kind of swept him away. It became this kind of funny, you know, sort of, you know, thorn in the side kind of joke. And that was it. That I think that was my most grounding moment. I think that's kind of what cemented it for me, is that role. You know, everything culminated up to that point. And then the circumstances I was in to take that job, where I was a glorified secretary for someone, making sure that he's getting his tea, that his day is organized. I was a master organizer. Oh my God. I still keep the notebooks because I want to show them to people that work with me, that this is how I used to organize my CEO's day. And I did it purely because I wanted to find a better way to do it. You know, people did all kinds of things. I would print out his daily Outlook calendar in a single format. I print it in a tiny, like 40%, and I'd paste it on the inside. And I have this notebook where there's a stack of this many days of activities glued on top of the next for like almost a year and a half.
It's pretty OCD.
It's crazy. I went through multiple notebooks, just like, you got to do this now, you got to do this now, you got to do this now. But to be fair, like, that wasn't the only job. The other job was that I was also part of the project management team launching the company. So I got to use like project management skills. So you know, that was great for me. So, but I think it was like the humility of that situation. Not having money, having made a few bad decisions, ending up in a situation which was not my making, but I can't blame life for my situation. I have to take responsibility. And so for me, taking that job was the first step in correcting the path that I had not gotten onto in the first place, was following a career. You know, because up till then I was just like, earthquake, volunteer work, join an NGO, go up north, help people, kumbaya. Not realizing how it's actually kind of leading me towards like perpetual disasters in my career eventually, where I just fell off a cliff. And I was just like, wow, thank God I have my wife to keep me sane. Otherwise I probably would have gone bonkers.
Well, that's interesting. The path or the realization, it comes at different points for different people. I want to jump into a few thought experiments. It has to do with Digital Street and Funa. Okay, the first one is Funa. Like, how was that done 100 years ago? What's a version of Funa from 100 years ago? Because there'd still be travelers. You know, they'd go to different places. In their own town, they know what's good and what's bad. There's word of mouth, but you know.
The version of Funa 100 years ago would have been, and to be honest, like 100 years ago, things were still pretty evolved. I mean, we had the Industrial Revolution that started, right?
Mhm.
Like the locomotive and automobiles had come in.
Yeah.
So mobility was already happening,
Mhm.
I think it would have been a bus full of people who enjoy eating food, traveling the world perpetually. I think
But how are they letting other people know about their experiences? Because that's what.
through the journey.
Because what I personally think is the human needs haven't really evolved for a very long time. It's the exact thing, the Maslow's hierarchies. We just deal with it differently.
You've just you've basically just hit a massive theory that I've been trying to put words around. We're going to talk about this.
But it is true, right? It's the exact same crap over and over. And we've seen this story. We've seen this movie a million times.
Yeah.
So Earth's been around for 4.5 billion years. But the one need that I see Funa solving is giving unsuspected people some sort of opinions from experts or other crowdsourced opinions so that they can make better decisions themselves.
Yeah.
How are people doing that 100 years ago?
I don't know, man. That's a good question.
They must
to be
have
honest.
been.
They had to have been.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like, look, I mean, people who were traveling a lot, eventually they'd travel to the same place again.
Mhm.
At least once, right? Like
Yeah.
someone who was a frequent traveler was frequenting some of the same places over and over again. And so they
Yeah.
became recognizable. And
Yeah.
because there were less people in less places, they
Yeah.
probably stood out more, right? Oh, it's that guy who I saw 10 years ago and, he had like
Yeah.
a thicker mustache, but, same person. And what have you been doing? Oh, I've
Yeah.
been hunting buffalo. And,
Yeah,
it's like you should go up north here because they've got great. And so people
Uh-huh.
migrated there because they're like, hey, they've got great buffalo. Let's move
Yeah.
over there. I think migration patterns are very similar. It's just that what we're trying to do is we're turning the pyramid upside down.
Yeah.
Where I think back then it was more about mass movement
Yeah.
and taking knowledge and taking that knowledge to other places.
Yeah.
Where now that knowledge is omnipresent.
Yeah.
Where it doesn't matter geographically where you are.
Mhm.
So I think I still feel like it probably was, a few people who were kind of developing this movement around the idea that food is amazing. It's not just It's not meant to sustain you, but it's meant to be experiential. And there were
Yeah.
always people who experimented with food.
Yeah.
I think that maybe it was a lot more intense back then because now everyone's like a photographer, everyone's a storyteller, everyone's a food creator.
Yeah.
It's just easier to do that, and that's just the nature of things.
Yeah.
But I think back then it was so specialized that they were probably just the class clown in
Yeah.
in every sense of the word. Like
Yeah.
wherever they went, they were just the person who was just different because they were like, but why is this different?
Yeah.
Oh, it's so interesting. So you eat with your left hand or you eat with this on the right. It's like
Yeah.
knowing those little nuances or the differences in like culture.
Mhm.
I think it was probably more of what anthropology, I suppose, like the study of people and
Right.
like, cultures and places.
Yeah.
I think they were probably just anthropologists documenting life. I don't know, like it's such a interesting, I really trying to think about what it would look like. I mean,
Yeah.
just so many different shapes.
Because it was happening in some way. I'm while you were talking, I was thinking of one potential way. So like part of Funa is helping you make decisions
Yeah.
whether to walk into an establishment or not.
Yeah.
And that's a small part of it, right? I would go up to a restaurant, look at the mat in front, and see how many footsteps are on or how scrubbed it really is.
The more beaten, the better.
The more beaten, the better. It's probably not because people are rushing out, mostly
Yeah.
rushing in.
Yeah.
Like how they have in keypads on doors that actually lock you. One way to figure out someone's entry piece,
Yeah.
see which ones hit the most, and you
Yeah.
can see thumbprints, and you can see those buttons worn
Yeah.
out a little bit. So that could be one of the.
That's a
ways
good
to
point,
go.
actually.
Yeah.
So I mean, I guess like if you look at the context of, you go to Paris,
Yeah.
and you have a cafe at one street corner, and just across the street you've got another cafe, and one of them
Yeah.
is bustling. I mean, it's
Yeah.
busy,
Yeah.
but they're not selling anything different than the other cafe. But
No.
the other cafe is like crickets chirping, it's quiet. You maybe have one person, probably the owner, sitting outside,
Yeah.
and it's just, what's the difference? Like, what are they doing differently?
Yeah.
That was usually the measure of what's a good place, is like how many people are swarming there.
Yeah. Like footfall.
Exactly,
Yeah.
right? Like the traffic. And so kind of,
Yeah.
same point as yours, like how much
Yeah.
traffic is the mat scene, and how worn is, the material.
Yeah.
But the problem with that is it's so limited to that one thing, that one moment,
Yeah.
that one situation. It's hard to transfer that unless enough people congregate at that one place, and
Yeah.
that's kind of, I feel like, okay, maybe it didn't exist, but it would be a restaurant on wheels.
Yeah.
or a restaurant with a changing menu on wheels.
Yeah.
So the idea of it having to be in perpetual motion, so it could be a locomotive, for example,
Yeah.
that is providing guests the cuisine of the country that they're in at that time.
Yeah.
So it's a global train, it's traveling the world, and it's serving you the food of the country that you're in. Kind of like how airlines do it today, right? You're traveling
Yeah.
to a destination, eat the food of that place, or
Yeah.
vice versa.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like that, and it's
That's pretty cool.
you know, it's just for me, it's so it's a 3-step process, right? It's like first you got to organize the information,
Mm-hmm.
then you have to make the information you have to be able to give people the power of being
Yeah.
able to participate with the information.
Yeah.
Not some of the fixed points, but with some of the fluid points, right? Where they
Yeah.
can express opinion in a structured way.
Yeah.
And then the third part is how you can take all of that and somehow regurgitate that back to them
Yeah.
in a way that you're kind of doing with me right now during this this vlog.
Yeah.
Is like you're
Yeah.
helping me see, asking me questions and asking me to see things in a different way. It's like
Yeah.
I'm realizing things as you said I
Yeah.
would. It's kind of doing the same thing. It's like giving you back something in a slightly different way
Right.
and helping you see the best parts of it.
Right.
So yeah, it's just, I don't know. It doesn't answer your question at all. I think it's just probably.
But I like the vision of this moving locomotive of some sort.
Yeah, it's like people who
That's
love to
kinda
travel and just
lively.
experience.
When it's passing through streets, people are. It's like the ice cream truck is right now. Like
Exactly.
you know it's
Yeah.
coming, and you know there's stories in that train
Yeah.
that you need to hear.
Exactly. It's
As well.
I don't know what there are some. The Orient Express, I guess, is a very famous one. You know, if the Orient Express was serving the cuisine. It
Yeah.
just I don't know. It just wow. Maybe that's what we need to do.
You just you went back 100 years just to
Yeah.
figure out what you need to do today.
Sometimes you just have to.
What about digital street? Like how is that happening 100 years ago? Or okay, before that, what problem is digital street solving?
Digital Street's core problem that
Yeah.
it was solving was to help create a revenue stream for Funa. So that
Okay.
Funa, it was like it was the barnacle and Funa side.
Uh-huh.
Eventually, it became the ship and Funa became the barnacle. It just
Uh-huh.
the relationship changed.
Yeah.
So the problem that it started solving was to create cash flow so we could run the other thing, which was for me the bigger thing, right?
Yeah.
But the problem it's solving that it actually came out to solve and it's continuing to solve is that the void that I saw and why I thought this was the right choice to make
Mhm.
and not many of the other things that I could have possibly done
Yeah.
was that, okay, what do I know? I have skills in a certain area, but
Yeah.
one thing that I do know is that what most people approach in this area is very standardized, it's very traditional. A lot of the agency
Yeah.
environments, and by the way, I have no right to be an agency person because I've never been in an agency. I've
Right.
never worked with an agency.
Mhm.
I've always hired agencies, I've worked with them, I've
Yeah.
appreciated their work, and I've always, to be fair, always been the guy who didn't want to ruin their weekends and launch a campaign at midnight because everyone else was
Yeah.
doing that. You know, that was
Yeah.
like, for me, that was like, they should be able to have like some civility in their life. They need to have
Yeah.
their weekends.
Yeah.
That changed when I started my own company. I never gave anyone weekends, but that's for another time.
They're
But I,
listening.
yeah. But the problem I think has been that how do we get people to address the needs of digital strategy or digital marketing or
Yeah.
digital communications,
Yeah.
but how do you step back from all of that and just kind of look at the big picture first and just see what's the problem you're trying to solve as a company, as a business,
Yeah.
or what are the challenges that you're facing? Let's forget about the fact that you need a website or you need social media or you need great creatives.
Yeah.
Let's just look at what is it that you do and are you doing the best version of that? How do you
Yeah.
step back from that, right? So it's like management consulting, I guess, in a way, right?
Yeah.
And how do you then come back and say, okay, fine, I need to get an expert who can help me analyze a problem, see the gaps, and then see how maybe a website or social media or creatives can help me address that, if
Yeah.
that's even the need. A lot of clients come to us, and I'm sure to you as well,
Mhm.
where they have a fixed idea of what they need.
Mhm.
You're probably thinking, well, maybe, or maybe that's not what you need, and you need something entirely different.
Yeah.
You know, you're saying that you're having a hard time retaining customers. Maybe you need to run a marketing campaign. Well, maybe you need to improve your customer service first.
Yeah.
And a lot of what I try to do in this is, you know, we try to treat what we actually do as last mile.
Yeah.
And the sort of the iceberg under the ocean is really kind of analyzing and understanding what's
Yeah.
the core of the problem and how can we transform that problem. So, you know, to put digital transformation into this space. Like for
Yeah.
me, that's, I think, the thing that I really kind of try and bring to the table, right?
Yeah.
The skills are everything else, but skills are transferable,
Sure.
they're acquirable. But for me, it's like, okay, you want to be prepared for the digital age,
Yeah.
for instance, right? But you're not going to do that if you're going to have sluggish decision-making processes, bureaucratic, elements, and then people who just averse to change. Period.
Yeah.
You can fluff it up and you can make a great deck and you can present to all the decision makers of the world, but
Yeah.
if they're not willing to see that change,
Have
it's
a
just
great
never going to happen.
innovation party
Or develop a business unit and give them a budget and say innovate, but then you don't
Innovate,
actually let them innovate when they
Yeah.
come to you with innovation. And I've seen this time again.
time and time again, for sure.
So I come to the table and I say, look, you're not going to like me because I'm going to tell you things that you don't want to hear.
Yeah.
Okay, but you're going to pay me to do that because I'm going to actually then help you see how breaking away that walnut and coming back to the table with a fresh mind is going to help
Yeah.
you see, your light version as well,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's like how do you get rid of all that fat and just think about, okay, what's the core? Like take my ego and my
Right.
pride out of it, right? So it's I gave a presentation at Google last year,
Mm-hmm.
and it was basically on digital transformation and local search.
Yeah.
And I think I realized through the job with the British Council, because that my job was digital transformation. I was leading digital transformation across like 7 countries in South Asia.
Right.
It's like the most difficult countries in the world, man. I mean,
Yeah.
South America probably just had it slightly better than me did.
Yeah.
I had Iran, Afghanistan, India, Pakistan, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh. Sri Lankans are awesome people. They're
Yeah.
so easy to work with. They're like,
Yeah.
everything is good and they'll give you a beer.
Yeah.
Afghanistan has its challenges.
Yeah.
Iran extremely,
Yeah,
like
sure.
challenging. And I realized that, one size cannot fit all, so I have to
Mhm.
really sort of be agile.
Yeah.
And, coming out of that, I realized it was less about the skill that I was going to sort of provide or hiring great people
Yeah.
and helping them do their job better. And it was more about like influencing the decision makers to let these people do their job.
Right.
So it became less about transforming digitally and more like mentally, like people
Yeah.
transformation, because that's really where the transformation truly is.
Correct.
It's helping a C-level person understand that, look, the reason why your company is failing is because of you.
Yeah.
But you don't need to take offense. What
Mhm.
you need to do is try and figure out what can we do to rectify this so we can be on the right path. So there's a 3-pronged strategy: short, medium, long term.
Yeah.
What can we do quick wins? What can we address that can actually see results in 6 to 12 months?
Mhm.
And what do we need to put into place that over 24 months can actually be long term?
Yeah.
And we don't need to future proof anything. We just need to think about the future and understand the bigger picture.
Yeah.
In college, I studied economics,
Mhm.
and we had a professor, Michael Moore, not the same one. This
Gotta
guy was
be the
this guy was a
same one.
player.
Yeah.
Awesome guy.
So was the other
Also
one.
passed away, man. I seem to be bringing up a lot of the
Lot of-
deceased, unfortunately. They've had an impact on my life. What can I say?
Yeah.
He taught us economics with graphs.
Mhm.
He never used books, never used formulas, always just graphs.
Yeah.
Everything was a question and answer and a graph.
Yeah.
Our exams were graphs.
Yeah.
While I didn't do very well in his course, what I did take away from the one thing about, like the black hand, the invisible
Yeah.
hand, Adam
Yeah.
Smith, and how law of averages and all of that.
Yeah.
It had a huge impact again, like, because for me it was always like, okay, I'm seeing a glass, but if I take like 20 steps back, what is it really?
Yeah.
It's a vessel, or it's a
Yeah.
container, or something else. It could be, you could transform it. And so for me, it was always like, how can I help people see something from a slightly bigger perspective and then
Mhm.
zoom in again
Yeah.
and see that thing from a fresh pair of eyes. So I think
Yeah.
Digital Street tries to solve the problem in a low cost way,
Mhm.
where we help people break their preconceived notions and revisit what they think their problem is and try and understand maybe there's a different problem, maybe there's no problem at all.
Yeah.
And then we try and use our skill sets as what we call tools in our basket.
Yeah.
Rather than saying we do this, that, the other, we say those are just tools in our basket.
Yeah.
Let's figure out which of these we need to use in what combination by first analyzing what the problem is.
Yeah, and it has to be problem specific as well. Like, one of the things that's resonating with me is, even though we're a digital agency too, we have this heavy focus on the offline part of whatever solution is coming up with, because we're uncompromising on that. If we don't have that piece, then nothing that you build on top of it, the digital side, will work at all.
Yeah.
But I want to start wrapping things up. So I have one last point of discussion with you. Everything that we've talked about, these theories, these things that are cemented within you, the things that you're working on, are going to be translated to your newborn that's going to coming into your life. And one of the things that we were talking about before we started recording is, as well as about the black and white and being the gray and being opinionated. And I think you're starting to think about what you're going to teach to your community.
I should be, I suppose.
If you are,
Yeah.
how
Right now, I'm just thinking about what looks good on that wall.
but I know
But
baby
yeah,
steps.
yeah.
No pun intended. But tell me, like, let's do that thought experiment right now, and it'd be a nice way to close off as well. Like, what everything that you've been through and learned, like, how is that going to translate into some sort of learnings? And are you, having found yourself with the Zohare light, is that the version that's going to be imprinted on and cloned, or tell me, what are you going to do on that front?
It's a great question. I had a very simple principle about becoming a parent. That if I ever was to become a parent, it would only be on my terms, not because society dictated it or culture dictated it or parents or whatever. And I'm very happy that it's happening exactly that way. That at 39 and my wife is 37 and we're going to have our first child.
Yeah.
We're, I guess, a little older culturally speaking in terms of becoming parents. I think we beat everybody in our network, which is awesome. So we can definitely call that a win. We've been married 12 years, together 14, or 15 actually, and known each other 25 years. And I think it has a lot to do with these things. I think it has to do with the depth of our relationship as individuals and how we are two individuals with a lot of stuff that we found in common, created in common, and eventually shared in common as well, right? We found love, we found happiness, we found home, we found a company, and now we're finding a kid. But I think for me, the principle was where I start my life as a parent has to be exactly where my father started his life as a parent. So I cannot be one step less.
Yeah.
I cannot bring a child into a world where I am inadequate as a parent, where my father was providing me with whatever. And my father, by the way, to be fair, something he resonates with, he constantly tells us is that, when he left the Air Force, he had 17,000 rupees in his wallet, literally.
Yeah.
And he started a business, and he had a family of people that trusted him, and he was a go-getter, and he just figured stuff out, and he did really well.
Yeah.
His life as a parent for me was exponentially different than that for my elder brother, who grew up in a Air Force home. I grew up in a business home.
Yeah.
So I saw a much different life, traveled the world, did a lot of more fun things. My brother, is amazing. He's not jealous, I think. But
we'll
he
find
loves
out.
me. Yeah, we'll find out. So for me, it was, how can I start my parenting life or my life as a parent at the same point when my father started his? And my father was 47 when he became a dad. So my dad's 87 right now. Yeah, so 88 now, actually.
Wow.
And so I'm like 10 years ahead. So I feel like I have a home, I have a company, I have a great partner, and I'm happy where I am. So I was like, okay, I may not be a war hero.
Yeah.
I don't want to be. I may not have written a book. Well, he did that much later anyway. And I don't have like this enormous legacy behind me where I can walk into any place and things will just happen for me and I don't have to pay or ask anyone anything. But actually I'm happy with the way that I have it, where I have to actually still fall in line and, pay the bill and do all of that because I feel better that way. And so for me, that principle sort of just really culminated. And it helped a great deal having a wife like Sophia because she never actually validates things unless she believes in it. And when she does, then she helps me make those decisions to go into it better.
Right.
So I think like the thing that I want my kid to see, I guess, like, if my kid ever sees this eventually, is you'll find the best version of yourself through life and circumstances. You just don't need to struggle to find it before it finds you, I suppose. There's this beautiful moment where it's like, I don't know, or life was born or whatever it was.
That's a Dr. Seuss quote, isn't it? What you're seeking is seeking you as well, or something like that.
And I feel like, I think it's just, we spend so, I always said, if you look hard enough for something, you're going to find it. But I never said that in a good way. It was like, if your parents are trying to find something, like you're hiding something from them, they'll look hard enough, they'll find it.
Yeah.
Even if it doesn't exist, it'll manifest itself.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's kind of the wrong way to do it, personally. I feel like, let life happen to you, but kind of happen to life as well at the same time. So there's just constant seesaw of activity that's happening, but it's never like in anticipation of something better.
Yeah.
It's like, better is now.
Yeah.
Just make it better than it was a second ago.
Yeah.
And just keep doing that. And, it'll figure itself out. So it's just like, I think I think we'll be wonderful parents. I think we've
Yeah.
been told that we would be wonderful parents as a way of influencing us to become parents, but I truly do believe that, because I think don't we don't want to mollycoddle our kid. We're not going to, like, if the kid falls, let him get back up. He's a boy,
Yeah.
by the way.
Yeah.
We don't want to, nurse him and surround him with too much love and, do the things that are, I think, we have a nanny, but we'll be parents. But we want to try and keep like a balanced relationship, so that the sooner he realizes that he can actually get up and do his own things
Yeah.
on his own and figure stuff out, he's allowed to do that.
Yeah.
And we'll figure out what needs to happen along the way.
That's most of life, isn't it? I think it's a great way to wrap it up for Zohare Jr. when you're watching this. Let it happen. I mean, find it, but let it happen to you as well. What you're seeking is also seeking you, and I think that applies to pretty much everyone. I think that can resonate with everyone on that level.
Yeah.
Zohare, we're gonna have tons of follow-up chats based on what we talked about.
Looking forward to it.
But this was a great conversation. Thanks for coming in, man.
Thank you very much. It was really wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the post, and share with everybody in your network. Have a good day.